I've ruined it. Now what do? And I'm here to tell you that lots and lots of times you start a work, and I must admit I love the beginnings of my paintings or drawings, establishing the composition, being excited about the idea, putting it down on paper, and I really, really love that. And probably the first 2 hours. But sometimes, and I'm guessing more than half actually, I find that I get to a stage where I think I've ruined it. I've got enough experience to know that I probably haven't ruined it. I just need to persevere with it and take it slowly and have some idea of where I'm going with it. Look back at my original idea. If I'm working from a thumbnail, look at my thumbnail, see why my thumbnail worked and why it's not translating to my bigger picture. If I haven't done a thumbnail, I might actually do a little sketch at that stage so that I can nut out what's going on, why is the picture not working. But inevitably, you know, you're toddling along like that, and then you start to climb a mountain, and you have to get over that hill down the other side for it to be traveling smoothly again. And I know that in my classes, in my regular drawing classes, I often go around to students, especially those that are fairly new to the class, and they've turned the page over and they're starting again. And I always ask them to go back to the original so that I can see what it is that's been troubling them, so that we can work through why it's not working, how can we make it work. And 9 times out of 10, it is absolutely worth continuing on with the original. There's that expression, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I wonder if anyone has ever done that. I'm sure not. But you know what I mean. In other words, people turn over when they think they've ruined it, but often it is because they're not sure how to continue and to improve it. So I guess that's the same as feeling like they've ruined it. So today I'm going to show you some ways of moving on with a drawing in particular, because I'm talking about drawing, but this applies to all artwork. And in many respects, when you're painting, it's a bit easier because you can paint over what you've already done. But I don't mean obliterate what you've already done and start again. That's the whole point of today, is instead of starting again, how can you rework or work into or develop the work that you've already started and you think you've ruined it, so that you can get back to that charm again. It wasn't one of my favorite demonstrations. I don't remember what the deal was. First step is I want to make my picture resemble what I'm looking at, and it's a bit mucked up. So there are a couple of things you need to do. If you want to create an image that is a good copy of this, you need to look at your proportions, and you need to look at shapes of tone. So I can see that I've exaggerated shapes of tone here. I haven't done particularly well with proportions, so I'm going to fix them. And my biggest technique suggestion to you, so it's a process of analysis. What is going on that is making your picture not what you want it to be? Or you've ruined it, you think you've ruined it. And my best piece of advice is don't rub it out. Read my lips. Don't rub it out. Because some of these things that you've drawn, some of the marks that you've put on, some of these lines that you've done, they work. And you can manipulate and change the things that don't work without rubbing everything out. So I quite like that negative shape that I've got, the dark against the light of that leaf, although I really do like the shape of the leaf a bit more, and that might improve what's going on here. So I'm re-establishing an edge here. Now, once you've drawn the line that you want, you can come back in with an eraser. So instead of rubbing the whole thing out, you can do something like that, okay? But what I said earlier was that I like the proportion in the photograph and not particularly in my leaf on here. If I measure my leaf with my pencil, it's about the same length as my pencil. And how does that compare to my mandarin? It's about the same width as the mandarin. Let's see if that applies to my photograph. Oh, it looks like I've been drawing it at about the same size. I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to take a piece of paper and I'm going to go from that end of the leaf to that end of the leaf. Ah, there you can absolutely see. I'm pleased I did that. So that's about 1 1/3. I'm estimating that that's about 1/3. Yeah? So that is the first error. And I could see that this was too small. So I'm going to adjust it. And if it's 1 1/3, I can take my piece of paper and I can go 1 and 1, and I want 1/3 is about that long. Okay, so it doesn't have to be exact, but it does help a little bit to have something to measure against. And now some of those lines are lovely. So I can just extend that leaf, and I'm getting this beautiful negative shape in here. Okay, so can you see I haven't rubbed out? I've just re-established the leaf. And I'm going to use a bit of contour drawing to put that in. I don't mind that it's gone off. Now I can rub off this edge here, because we don't want to see that leaf. Although, having said that, it might actually look quite nice because it shows the process of what we've been doing. So I know usually when I'm demonstrating on a Friday, I am doing quick work. I'm not too worried about what things look like. That's my excuse for why the original drawing didn't look great. So yep, I think I'm happier with that. I'm not particularly happy with the mandarin now, and let's see what's going on with that. Even though that's a lovely negative shape in there. Flattened it out a bit. This has actually got a roundness on it, which shows that the inside of the mandarin has got a dip. So that's working a lot better. Just by changing that shape, I'm preferring it. Now, I've got a funny sort of dark in there. As I said before, it's not a particularly fantastic photograph. So having chosen to draw it is not necessarily a good idea, but I am showing you how I'm going to improve it. And while I'm looking, I can see that this leaf has got a fold. But the tones are very, very similar. So the tones there are similar there, and the tones in here are buried. and are very similar, and I don't think they'll look interesting like that. So I'm going to just draw that leaf and just bury that in the dark as if there's just shadow underneath the mandarin. So you do have to take some artistic license when you are working on your pictures, particularly if you don't think it's worked. You can analyze, is the picture worth changing? Is the original that you're looking at worth changing to make your composition better? Because it's about the competition, not the competition. It's about the composition. It's not about the original picture. Okay, so I lightened off that edge because I've put a strong edge on that, and I just wanted to see that that leaf folded over there. And I quite like what's happening, so it's working a little bit better. Can you see that I'm using a kneadable eraser? Because I quite like the marks that are under there, and I don't mind seeing a residue of the marks that were there before. Okay, here it's getting very confusing between the bottom of the mandarin and what's going on. So what I'm going to do, that artistic license that I was talking about, I'm going to darken this. This is still my 2B pencil, so that the bottom of the mandarin is just buried in the dark of its own shadow. And I'm actually going to soften these edges to make this mandarin look a little bit more 3D. Now, I'm not taking as much time as I usually would because I have got a lot to get through. But your decision making at the outset, oh, there's my leaf. That was the leaf at the top. So I can choose, do I want to put 2 leaves in there, or do I want to have that being the leaf and then having a nice triangle there. So I've had a little bit of a happy accident there. And now here, I want to differentiate between the mandarin and the leaf again. So the way that I'm resurrecting this particular picture is by exaggerating, well, by examining my proportions first, by making some decisions, artistic decisions about, is the quality of this something that I want to capture, or do I want to improve on that? And I would like to improve on that, and the way I'm doing that is to exaggerate the tonal differences. So I might lighten that off a little bit. And I'm already liking it. I'm not sure that I like the harshness of this dark, so I'm softly blending the edges so that it becomes much more three-dimensional. Obviously, I've got some very rough shadowing there. We sometimes get impatient with a drawing or a work when we come to the middle. We're in a hurry to be finished. And sometimes all that it needs to fix it up is for you to take a bit more care. Okay, so that was your first way of looking at your work to help you fix it up. So that's a little bit better than it was. I'm not sure that I like that shape leaf, so I might extend that to make it a little bit more abstract. There's a nice light edge which plays into a nice contrast against that leaf there. As I said before, it's not the most brilliant subject, but I am much happier with it now than I was before. And I'm finding more and more things to do, like put a very deep tone in the background, even if I'm not finishing all those leaves, which I'm not. By putting this deep tone in the background, those leaves are coming out and the mandarin is popping forward. Okay, so that is my way of resurrecting this a little bit to look a bit better, and I think maybe it does in terms of it looking more realistic. I can see that I've drawn a head leaf there that has got nothing to do with the leaf that is in the picture. So I've drawn a leaf based on what my head is telling me, rather than the beautiful, really weird shape of leaf that's actually in the picture. So I could probably go on and on just on this subject, but I won't. Okay, so that's technique number one, is to examine why things are going wrong. Look at your proportion and look at your tonal contrast and exaggerate it if need be, and make artistic decisions about what you're going to leave out if you need to. So that's the first one. The second one we touched on last week, and that is to start changing this work into something else. So the first technique was all about keeping the original idea, which is to do the mandarin and the leaves, or to do a portrait, or whatever your original idea is. And those are the ways of doing it. The second idea is to actually use this as a bouncing off point for something else. And let's see if I can find a view. I think I've taken my scissors away that I had last week. No, there they are. So what happens, let's find a view in our own work like we did last week. And you might be surprised at what you find. So one of the things that I love doing, and I think I've done a whole Friday post on it, is called Dare to Stuff It Up. If you've already, as far as you're concerned, ruined your piece, and you actually don't want to take it where you want it to go in terms of your original idea, then you've got nothing to lose by trying other things. So I much prefer that as an abstract than what was there before. And in fact, if I fill this in quickly, it doesn't have to be an abstract. It can remain as my mandarin, but by cropping it, I've actually, let's make something up, I've actually made it much more interesting. This is a bit meh, so whether it's much more interesting or not is, is a moot point, but finding a mount and looking and cropping different parts of your work is a good way of looking at it. So let's see if I take a square, will I find something more interesting? Now that's a bit better. Turn it upside down, turn it that way. So it's pretty much as we were talking about last week. So if you've ruined it, you might as well try something else. Let's see if we can add some interest here by changing the marks that we've made. So do something out of the ordinary. The thing that I like least about this work is this shape here. It's really not doing it for me, even if I want to keep it as a leaf. Now, if I ruin it some more, and I'm deliberately going to do this, if I put some head veins in, I reckon that's ruining it even more. Because I know, and I knew before I did it, that that was going to be from my head, and it's not going to look attractive for that very reason. But what happens if I actually turn it into a mark? So I'm actually enjoying some mark making now instead of those made up veins. Putting some mark making, some deliberate mark making that's a bit out of the ordinary, that has changed it into a much more interesting work, I think. And in fact, for this fold down, I might put some marks in the other direction. Now that's working as far as I'm concerned. I'm not sure if it's working tonally against there, but because this is a different mark, I think it's helping my composition. So I'm going to press a bit harder with my 2B and go right to a very deep tone so that this mark making stands out. I am much, much happier with that. So a takeaway from that is, don't just do head stuff, do a deliberate design. Don't do head stuff. I suppose mark making to a certain extent is head stuff, but think about it a little bit more loosely and not rigid, and don't put it in because it's the veins of the leaf. Put it in because it's going to create some nice character. So I think that has enhanced the work. Try not to have too many different marks in your whole piece. So the fact that we've got a little bit of mark making there has changed that whole composition, in my opinion. Okay, how else can we change this and make it into something a little bit different? You can try mixed media. One of the reasons I love working in mixed media when I paint is because I'm not restricted to working just with one thing. Well, that sounds a bit obvious, doesn't it? It means that I can get some happy accidents. I can experiment with what's going on. Again, I'm kind of playing back into what we did with a bit of colour in our Tuesday critique. If any of you watched that, I've just realized some of you would not have. So what I mean by that is, in terms of mixed media, you can put something over this and change the nature of this pencil. So this is actually a watercolor marker made by Winsor Newton. It's absolutely gorgeous, but I am going to change this work by adding some color, and I'm going to put a wash over it. Now, if you have used pencil, it should not move when you wet it. So by move, I mean it shouldn't dissolve. And you can see that as I'm coloring over where the dark pencil is, it is still keeping the dark. So the pencil is already giving us the tone, and the color is giving us a little bit more interest. And I'm using the marker as in the direction that I wanted to go. If I'd left a bit more white, because this is a watercolor marker, I can wash a bit of color in. So that's actually mixed media. So when you use mixed media, different media on the same page, you do have to recognize that sometimes they don't mix. So I think I've mentioned before that charcoal physically doesn't mix very well on top of graphite, especially if you've colored your graphite in. If you've got a good layer of graphite there, you can see that it isn't grabbing the charcoal very well, or that line grabbed it a bit better, but it's still not as good as here where there's no graphite. However, if that's the look that you want, then try charcoal. Let's see what happens if we put some charcoal over this. It's not typical, it's not usually mixed, but let's see what happens. Yeah, it's okay. Now it's skimming a little bit there. So it all depends on the materials you're using. If you've got colored pastels, for example, and you wanted to color your mandarin in with colored pastels, like this charcoal, how's that for a dirty finger? Like this charcoal, your soft pastels won't be grabbed by that graphite. But try it. What have you got to lose? Okay, so there's a couple of different marks that you can make, or mixed media. I am just demonstrating. Generally, I wouldn't put quite so many media together, but I am going to show you. Let's go a bit crazy and draw with a pen on here. Now, this pen is actually called a Stay Anywhere permanent pen, which means it's going to draw on top of anything. It draws on top of plastic, on glass, and it remains permanent. So if you've got one of those pens, you can use it on anything. So what I'm doing now, as you can see, is I am playing, because if you've ruined it, maybe you'll have a happy accident and get something happening that you enjoy. We don't experiment enough. We always have this idea of a final picture in mind, and if it doesn't work, then we're disappointed. Let's just have a play, see what happens. Okay, so that's pen. Just as a matter of interest, this is a permanent pen, and but it's not a Stay Anywhere pen. I wonder if it'll go over the graphite. Yeah, it is, sort of. Yeah, it's catching in some places and it's skimming over in others. So try your materials. Okay, the last thing that you can do with your drawings is a bit of collage. Now, that's how I began my mixed media. I used pieces of tissue paper like this that I colored with ink, and you can use tissue paper. Just a word of warning that if you buy tissue paper from newsagents, from stationery shops for gift wrapping, that tissue paper does fade. It's only for gift wrapping, so you need to buy some tissue paper from an art store. The Japanese papers are absolutely beautiful and they won't fade. This is white tissue paper, as you can see, and I've colored that with permanent ink, so that's not going to fade. Now, there's lots of things you can do with collage, and I'm going to show you a couple. So there's nothing stopping you, even if it is in the context of a drawing and you don't want to create a mixed media, but you've gone and done something like this and you've gone, actually, you know what, I don't want that leaf like that anymore. I want it to have be much lighter. I've darkened it and I can't lighten it. Maybe you've drawn with pen. So, oh, I quite like that. Okay, that was a random piece of piece that I just cut, and look how that's landed. I really like that. But what I was going to show you is you can collage right on top. Now, I've cut out a very typical head leaf there. The glue that I use is diluted PVA, which is like a white wood glue. I'm not sure what other people in other parts of the world call it. You'll probably recognize it when you see it. I guess you could use, there's lots of glue sticks now that you can get, which soft wet glue. I'm not sure that I would use the kids, you know, those glues that look like lipsticks. Actually, I did this a bit asked about face. If you put the glue on that piece, you have a piece of newspaper over here and you put the glue on that piece, then you can stick it exactly where you want. So you can collage out something and then draw back on top of that. So once you have ruined something, you can dare to stuff it up. And when that's dry, if you've used something wet like I have, because I haven't got anything else, then you can come back in and draw back into it. So you can see that I am developing this mixed media. I guess what I want to get through to you guys in this demonstration is that all is not lost. In the first instance, you will learn more if you work back into your work. If you wanted to remain as the original chosen mandarin and leaves and whatever, and you still want to look like that at the end and you want to draw, then analyze and change it as you need to. Go slowly, there's no rush, don't get frustrated with it. If you're frustrated with it, put it away for a day and come to it the next day with fresh eyes. There is a gentleman in Perth called Ian D'Souza, and I'm not sure if he made up this quote that I'm going to give you or not, or if he got it from somebody else, but it's absolutely beautiful. And it's when you come to the end of the work, if you're not satisfied and you don't know if it's finished, etc., sleep on it, and the next morning God will have finished it for you. So I love that little phrase, that quote, because we are often so caught up in the idea that what we've done is terrible that we don't give ourselves any space for us to see it properly. We're so involved, especially if we're getting frustrated, and we take our frustrations out on how we're viewing something. And the next day or the next week, when we look at it, we see it in a completely different light. So I've got lots of dirty marks on that piece of paper because my hand was full of charcoal and everything. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to tear it off. And look what the tear off has done. It's given me that highlight back. So that solved my problem. So how about that? That's a happy accident. So that is the next way, and you can go on and on and on and on. So you're much more open to seeing new things. I quite like that. Okay, so that's the lesson for today, is don't be too worried if you've ruined something, if you think you've ruined something, because you probably haven't. Give yourself some patience. Thank you for joining me for my Friday afternoon video. It's been great having you on board. And of course, get drawing. Karen Frankel signing out. Cheers.